And what you would do is pick a person or a couple, drug them.
Yes, that's correct.
Take their passport and any valuables they might have and move on.
That's correct.
How many times do you think you did that?
I did so many times as I've had.
20? 120?
This is the clip from an interview of one of the notorious serial killers of our time, flaunting his doings, yet not admitting to his crime fully. Some tales are so twisted, they give you pause for thought. This one feels ripped straight from a blockbuster script. It's a gripping saga of a criminal genius, a serial predator, and a psychopath who terrorized multiple nations. A colossal tapestry of a deception, betrayal, and crime spawned by a single individual across borders. Enter the notorious mastermind, evading capture and fooling all in his path. Welcome to Mystery Revisit. Today, we're diving into an enigmatic case of infamous serial offender Charles Sobhraj. You might recognize the name from the acclaimed BBC documentary The Serpent, dubbed as such for his ability to slither away from authorities like a snake. Sobhraj's reign of crime unfolded predominantly during the tumultuous 70s, spanning multiple nations, from petty theft to outright murder. His nefarious deeds knew no bounds. Let's peel back the layers of Sobhraj's life and unravel the mysteries behind his persona and actions.
In 1944, in Saigon, Vietnam, then part of French Indochina, a boy was born to an Indian businessman and a Vietnamese mother as Hochan Bhavani Gurmukh Sobhraj. But from the very beginning, his life was marked by abandonment. His father refused to acknowledge him just like that. He walked away, married another woman, started another life. Imagine growing up knowing you were the child someone chose to forget. And this rejection, it wouldn't hurt him, it would define him. When he was just 4 years old, his mother married a French soldier stationed in Saigon. New father figure, new authority, but not the love he was craving. Years later, Charles would say something chilling. He never forgave his father, not once. And if you think that resentment faded with time, it did not. It grew. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. This wasn't an ordinary childhood. Saigon in the late 1940s was exploding with violence. French colonial forces were fighting Vietnamese rebels, bombings, military presence, chaos in the streets. So while other children played, Charles was growing up surrounded by instability. Chaos outside, rejection inside, a dangerous combination. Fast forward to 1953, his life changed again. He moved to France with his mother and stepfather. New country, new language, new identity. But instead of belonging, Charles felt like an outsider. He hated his Catholic boarding school. He struggled to adjust. He felt invisible, especially after his mother had more children. The attention he craved slipped further away. And that's when something interesting happened. He discovered performance. At school, he began impersonating Charlie Chaplin. He made people laugh. He charmed them. For the first time, he realized something powerful. If he could not be loved, he could be admired. If he could not belong, he could manipulate. This was also around this time he changed his name from Hochan to Charles. A small change on paper, but a massive shift in his identity. This wasn't just a name change. This was reinvention. Hochan was the abandoned child. Charles was smooth, adaptable, calculating, and this would become his greatest weapon. At home, he never quite fit in. With new siblings taking attention, he felt pushed aside once again. And that constant rejection began to shape his temperament. He became difficult, rebellious, defiant. He ran away from home not once but twice. And where did he go? Back to Saigon, back to the father who never wanted him. Each time his father sent him away, each time Charles returned more disappointed, more resentful. At one point, after persistent begging, his father promised to send him a ticket so he could stay as a trial visit, a chance for him to stay with him. Charles waited and waited. The ticket never came. For a young boy, already struggling with identity, rejection, and belonging, that broken promise may have been the final crack. Because from this point forward, Charles stopped waiting for love and started taking control. And that's when the story starts getting dangerous. At some point, Charles came to a dangerous conclusion. Any attention, even negative, was better than none. And that belief, it pushed him over to the edge. He started small, petty theft, minor scams, stealing just to feel in control. But this wasn't about money. It was about power. And soon he had stolen enough to return to Vietnam, back to the father who never wanted him. But this reunion did not go the way he imagined. His father and his new family were not happy to see him. In fact, after Charles crashed his father's car, they sent him away to India, like a problem to be relocated. But Charles never stayed anywhere for long. He went back to Vietnam, and this time his father made it clear, "You are not staying. You are shipped back to France." Rejection again. And something inside him hardened. Back in France, the loneliness returned. So did the crime. This time, he pushed further. On his second robbery attempt in 1963, he was caught. His first time in jail. Now, here's the part that shaped him. His family refused to bail him out. They were done. And Charles, he never forgot that. He did not just feel abandoned, he felt betrayed. Prison did not change him, it upgraded him. Behind bars, Charles met up with a wealthy prison volunteer named Felix Descons. Felix visited weekly and used to help inmates. He donated his time. And Charles saw this as an opportunity. He charmed him, built in trust, and built a friendship. Felix even tried to reconcile him with his parents. And after Charles was released, he moved in with him. Think about that. From a prison cell to high society, Felix introduced him to elite circles. But here's the twist. Felix also had connection to the criminal underworld. And this time, Charles was not reckless. He was learning, absorbing, refining, and the petty theft was evolving. And then he met her future wife, Chantal Compagnon. She was from a conservative Persian background, a proper family, the kind of family that instantly disliked Charles. But that did not matter. Chantal was captivated by his charm, his confidence, his mystery. She fell hard, and at first she had no idea who he was. When she found out about his crimes, she could not walk away. And that's how strong his pull was. And this next part sounds almost fictional. The day he proposed to her, he was arrested. His crime? For stealing cars. The same car he used to take her on a romantic date. He was sentenced to 8 months. And Chantal, she waited, blamed the world, defended him, loved him. That level of loyalty would become very important later. After his release, they got married. For a brief moment, it looked like he might go straight. But Charles did not crave stability. He craved risks. He started forging checks, running scams, living two lives. He was arrested again, this time for writing forged checks on his sister's account. But she dropped the charges and he was free again. But he was still forging checks and they were bouncing left and right. He could slip through cracks, but eventually the cracks were closing. Police were circling. So he did what he always did when he was cornered. He ran, this time to India, with his pregnant wife. He borrowed Felix's car, said it was temporary, and never brought it back. On the journey to India, he and Chantal robbed tourists along the way. By now, crime was not impulsive, it was strategic. After arriving in Bombay, he set up shop, a front business. Behind it, drug smuggling, arms stealing, car theft operations, tourist robberies using stolen passports. And while Chantal cared for her newborn daughter, Charles built his empire of deception. But he had one weakness: gambling. And gambling leads to desperation. Drowning in gambling debt, he attempted an armed robbery at Hotel Asoka in Delhi in 1973. The plan failed and he was caught. But even in custody, Charles was not done scheming. He faked his illness and tried to escape with Chantal's help. But he was caught again. Now broken and exposed, he did something shocking. He begged his father for bail money, and to his surprise, he got it, even after everything. Now, after release, he fled to Kabul, Afghanistan. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. He began targeting travelers on what was known as the Hippie Trail, an overland route stretching from Europe through the Middle East into Southeast Asia. Thousands of young backpackers chasing freedom, trusting strangers, no digital records, no tracking system, no quick communication. It was a perfect hunting ground. He robbed them, drugged them, and disappeared before anyone noticed. He was arrested again in Afghanistan, ironically for not paying a hotel bill. And just like before, he faked his illness, escaped, and fled to Iran. But this time, he left his family behind. While Charles' crime escalated, Chantal broke. She had enough. She returned to France, sore of crime, and vowed never to see him again. For the first time ever, Charles was completely alone. No wife, no child, no safety net, just him and the road. For the next 2 years, he drifted across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, scamming tourists. Allegedly, even attempting to kidnap his own infant daughter, who was with his mother-in-law at that time, leaving her locked and drugged at a hotel room. At one point, he opened a curio shop in Thailand, a front that attracted foreign travelers. He was smuggling drugs, chains, and many other things, while also robbing rich tourists. But what he soon realized was that robbery was not enough anymore. Because power feels different when the victim never comes back. And that's when Charles Sobhraj stopped being just a con man and became something far more terrifying. Up until now, Charles Sobhraj was a thief, a manipulator, a fraud, a con artist. But around 1972, he crossed a line he can never uncross. And once he did, there was no going back. While traveling from Rawalpindi to Peshawar, he hired a Pakistani chauffeur named Habib, just a routine ride, or so it seemed. Somewhere along the journey, Charles drugged him and killed him. Why? To steal the car. That's it. No rage, no argument, just convenience. He was believed to be traveling with a woman whose identity remains unknown to this day. By the time authorities connected the murder to him a year later, Charles was already far gone. And now he knew something terrifying. He could kill and disappear. And then he pulled someone else into the darkness, his younger brother Andre. Andre was loyal, devoted, and obedient. He followed Charles everywhere. They pulled few heists in Turkey and ran to Greece. There too they drugged and robbed some tourists and were caught. And just before they were extradited to Turkey, Charles did what he always did. He faked illness, escaped custody. Again. But this time, Andre could not follow. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. That was the price of loyalty. Charles never looked back. Now he fled towards east, operating across India, Iran, Kashmir, and Near East. He refined his methods, targeted French and English-speaking tourists, backpackers, drifters, and spiritual seekers. He would approach them as a wealthy gem stealer. He would show himself as a sophisticated, calm, and helpful. Then he would use them as a drug courier, steal their passport, drain their money, or even worse. Tracking his victim became nearly impossible because he traveled using their identities. He wasn't hiding, he was becoming them. And then he met someone who would become a crucial part of his life. Marie-Andre Leclerc, a nurse from Quebec, on a vacation in India looking for adventure. Instead, she found Charles and fell completely under his spell. Even after parting ways, he wrote her letters, dozens of them, slowly pulling her in, convincing her to meet him in Thailand. By the time she arrived, she was hopelessly in love. She ignored the lies about his identity, ignored the other woman, ignored the red flags. Love made her blind, and Charles needed blind loyalty. For Charles, the hippie trail was not just a travel route, it was a gold mine. And Thailand, that was the headquarters. In Thailand, he and Mary drugged an Australian couple, stole their passports, their money, their tickets, but something went wrong. A hotel bellboy noticed them convulsing in their room. They survived. They were the only known survivors in Thailand, and their testimony would matter later on. But Charles learned something from this mistake. Next time, there would be no survivors. In Bangkok, he began assembling something far more dangerous, a circle, a clan, almost like a cult. He mainly recruited Westerners to make other victims comfortable around him and let their guards down. He would recruit people by pretending to help them during their difficult situations, indept in them, but the truth was, he was the one who had created the situation. He first got a young French traveler, Dominique, into his family. Dominique had traveled to Thailand in search of tranquility and somehow got involved with Charles. Charles invited him over to his place for a while and then poisoned him. He got sick with dysentery and Charles pretended to carry him back to health. Dominic became so indebted by this act that he became obedient and controlled. And that's how he built his loyalty. Not through fear, but through manipulation. More joined, Jacques, Yannick, and finally Ajay Chaudhary. Ajay was different, confident, cold, and strategic, just like Charles. He became Charles' right-hand man. Mary and Ajay knew about the killings. The others, likely pawns, bait, smiling faces to lure the next victim in. By 1975, this operation was fully working, and the killings escalated. His first known female victim, Teresa Knowlton, an American backpacker heading to Nepal for spiritual exploration. She crossed paths with Charles in Thailand. Soon after, her body was found in Gulf of Thailand, wearing a flowered bikini, initially ruled as a drowning until the autopsy said otherwise. It was a murder. Next victim, Vitali Hakim, a nomadic traveler. He moved into Charles' circle. Days later, Charles took him on a trip to Pattaya. Hakim never returned. His burned body was found beaten and set on fire. But here's what's chilling. Hakim had left behind his passports and the traveler's check, as if he fully trusted Charles. Trust was always step one. Then came a Dutch couple, Henricus Vintanya and Cornelia Hemker. Charles met them posing as Alien Dupius, a James Taylor, charming, generous, and convincing. He invited them to his villa in Bangkok. They were poisoned, haled and weakened, strangled and burned. But while this was unfolding, Hakim's girlfriend, Stephanie Perry, arrived in Bangkok looking for him. She walked straight into the trap. She asked too many questions, and days later, her body was also found drowned wearing a bikini. Now the pattern was clear, and the media had a nickname, the Bikini Killer. After a few days of these killings, Charles and Mary fled to Nepal using the Dutch couple's passports. In Kathmandu, they befriended two backpackers at the hotel they were staying. Connie Bronjek, an American, and Lauren Carrieri, a Canadian. Their bodies were found near a wheat field. Police even questioned Charles and Mary casually. But before suspicion grew, they used their passports of the latest victims and flew back to Bangkok. It was audacious, and it worked. Back in Thailand, the cracks had already begun to show. Jacques and Yannick found passports, documents, and belongings of the dead. They realized the truth and fled to Paris. Now finally, authorities were connecting dots, and Charles was on the radar. For the first time, the hunter was being haunted. He fled again to Calcutta. There he killed an Israeli student for his passport, moved to Singapore, returned to India again, and drugged 3 Frenchmen and left them for dead on the roadside. Miraculously, they survived. And survivors meant witnesses. And witnesses meant pressure. For years, Charles had operated like a ghost. But ghosts eventually leave fingerprints. And what happens next is where the chase really begins. By now, Charles had killed across borders, used stolen identities, outsmarted police in multiple countries, and somehow he kept walking free. But this chase was closing in, and this time someone refused to let him disappear. In Hong Kong, a man named Alan Gorey lost $8,000 to Charles, but he survived, and survivors were dangerous. Despite mounting suspicions, Charles and his accomplices were moving non-stop. India 1 week, Hong Kong the next, and Thailand again. They even boldly returned to Thailand, where police even interrogated them about the murders, but no arrest was made. Why? Lack of evidence and fear of damaging tourism. That decision changed everything because Charles now believed something fatal. He was untouchable. But there was one man who would not let this go, a Dutch diplomat named Herman Kenninpenberg. He was investigating the murders of 2 Dutch backpackers and he suspected Charles. While others hesitated, Kenninpenberg persisted. He pushed authorities for permission to search Charles' residence in Thailand. And what they found next changed the case. Passports, belonging of victims, damning evidences. This was the breakthrough. Because of him, Charles was indicted in multiple countries. and added the Interpol's most wanted list. The Serpent was finally exposed. The trio, Ajay, Mary, and Charles, fled to Malaysia. There, Ajay was sent to sell stolen gems. He handed over the jewels to Charles, then disappeared forever. Many believe Charles killed him there, his own right hand man. Loose ends were never tolerated. Charles returned to India next and started rebuilding again. He recruited two Western women, Mary Ellen Ether and Barbara Smith. He poisoned and killed a Frenchman named Jean-Luc Solomon. Bombay police were watching him, and in July 1976, he made a catastrophic mistake. He attempted to drug an entire group of 60 students. 60! He told them the pills were anti-dysentery medicine, but the doses was wrong. The students got sick too quickly. 3 of them grew suspicious and they alerted authorities. And this time, Charles was caught. Charles was indicted for the murder of Solomon alongside the poisoning. He was sent to Tihar jail, one of the India's most notorious prisons. His accomplices, Barbara and Mary Ellen, also confessed. The condition in Tihar jail was so unbearable that these two women tried to commit suicide while awaiting trial. But Charles, he thrived. Using smuggled gems, he bribed guards, secured privileges like television, phones, visitors. He turned prison into a stage. He gave paid interviews, hinted at more murders, and even tried to justify his crimes as a retaliation against Western imperialism. Most criminologists dismiss that completely. This wasn't ideology, it was ego. On the other hand, Mary, his longtime partner, was given a mercy deal after she got diagnosed with ovarian cancer and was sent back to Canada where she died in 1984. Before she died, she wrote a book claiming to be innocent on the wrongdoings of Charles and being a victim was emotionally entrapped by Charles. Then came one of the most shocking moves of his life. After serving 10 years, he threw a birthday party in prison, distributed sweets to guards and inmates laced with sleeping pills. They all passed out and he walked out of jail. He was free before he was caught in Goa after 22 days. But here's the twist. Getting caught was part of his plan. He wanted to be caught. Why? Because Thailand still had an active death penalty warrant for him. If India released him early, he would be extradited. So he engineered an escape, got an extra 10 years added to his Indian sentence, and by the time he finished those, Thailand's warrant would expire. It was calculated, cold, strategic, and he outplayed the system. In 1997, he was released, deported to France. He sold interviews, charged thousands of dollars for photographs, negotiated massive media deals. And when asked if he was lucky to avoid extradition, he said, "It's a game. I played my hand." He wasn't remorseful. He was proud. Then in 2003, in an almost unbelievable move, he returned to Nepal. Why? No one knows. He was spotted by a journalist in Kathmandu and reported to police. 2 days later, he was arrested in Casino. Charles thought he was in clear, but he had forgotten something critical. Nepal still had an active murder charges against him for the death of Connie and Laurent. This time, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. No escape plan worked. No manipulation saved him. Even in prison, he sought attention. He claimed to marry a Nepali woman 44 years younger. Authorities call it a publicity stunt. He had heart surgeries in 2017, and in 2022, after serving 19 years, Nepali court ordered his release under a senior citizen provision. He was deported back to France, banned from returning to Nepal, once again, a free man. Today, Charles Sobhraj walks free. Many of his victims never made it home. Families never got closer. And the man responsible still gives interviews, still shapes his narrative, still plays the game. The real question is not whether he was intelligent. It's this: should someone who showed no empathy to his victims receive mercy for the very system he manipulated? Do you think justice was served, or did he outsmart the world? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the mind of history's most dangerous criminals, subscribe. Because some stories aren't just about crimes, they are about how easily evil can wear a smile.